recently made a video about military recruiting woes, and I don't think it's the first one I've made, but it was regarding a new news article that came out within approximately the past week. I had a lot of questions for myself after that, and then people started posting comments on the video about it as well. And so basically it had to do with a new law that's being introduced that may or may not be passed. It was co-sponsored by multiple politicians, at least one of whom has been against military veteran benefits, okay, on at least one occasion that I remember. Probably more than one politician, probably more than one occasion. The legislation is about expanding access of military recruiters to be able to access student data at the high school and college level to include students that have dropped out of college. Now, why this is significant is because it really has to do with student data and privacy rights or lack thereof. Now, I started really looking into this, and this is actually a very convoluted topic. So while this legislation would expand access because they're busy being desperate for new recruits to continue on this whole dysfunctional cycle we have going on inside the U.S. government, where the U.S. government doesn't want to really be responsible for what happens with people after they join the military and the abuses that take place within the military, which are very well known in public at this point by many people, and what happens with military veterans when they get out. And it's just such a topic. It's such a convoluted topic that I can talk about forever. The bottom line is that I started looking into the topic, and it appears that over 20 years ago in the early 2000s, with the legislation No Child Left Behind, that was the beginning of this whole situation we're on right now, this whole track, where basically student data was to be given to military recruiters to recruit people potentially. And that include things like name, phone number, and address. All right, so there's been a lot of backlash and a lot of advocacy efforts about this through the many years. I've read a lot about it. And it's such a convoluted topic that there's actually a lawyer in a specific state who's part of their law firm is dedicated to this entire topic and helping parents navigate this entire topic. They actually earn a living this way, which just blows my mind, honestly. Through the years, it's evolved, but what I've seen the trend has been, despite a lot of the backlash and what people wanted was an opt-in policy or law, where basically parents and students had to opt in to giving military recruiters their student data and contact information instead of this opt-out policy, which is what the focus has been on for approximately 20 plus years now. Well, that never happened from what I can tell at a federal level. Instead, quite the opposite's been happening, where it's become more aggressive and more data being given more readily to military recruiters for the purpose of recruiting, making military recruiting easier, okay? Well, in allowing more access to high schools and colleges and career fairs. Where it's at right now is basically across the U.S. It varies state by state, in some cases locality by locality, about how to opt out. But generally speaking, it appears, and I was on the Department of Education website, I think it was just recently, like last number of hours, and kind of the general rule of thumb appears to be, again, this is not legal advice, I'm not a lawyer, I've not been to law school, but I was reading about this online, that parents can, in writing, opt out of their children having their data, name, number, address being given to military recruiters. And students 18 plus can as well. Now, this is what I've read is general. However, I also read this varies by state, locality by locality, potentially. Super complicated topic, super convoluted. So convoluted, in fact, that even after putting it in writing and submitting it to the proper officials, parents and students alike are advised to then follow up with the proper officials to make sure that they really have been opted out of the list. Evidently, there's some Pentagon lists as well, I read, where people can opt out of that. I never even heard of this before about the Pentagon one. I had heard about the schools, but as a student, I was actually never contacted, and I wonder if it's because I moved around too much. What's most kind of concerning about the situation is it really leaves vulnerable students, children that no one cares about, that don't have parents, don't have guardians that are going to, quote, opt them out, and that aren't able to opt themselves out because the laws, it appears, at the federal level became more stringent through the years. And at one point, children could opt themselves out in writing, and then it changed and they couldn't. And now it's like 18 plus. So you have to be in college. I didn't even know that was a thing. I I was never given the option. And in fact, I was reading online that a lot of parents have no idea that there is an option to opt their children out, and that's something they may want to consider doing or not doing. It's not even a conscious choice. Most people just are opted in by default because of these federal laws, and they just are none the wiser. One of the things that bothers me so much about the military recruiting federal laws is that our politicians are doing what's politically expedient for themselves always, whether it be waging wars and that cost people lives and harm their families, their careers, whatever the case may be, or whether it be military recruiting. They're not really concerned about like what happens to people after they join the military and what kind of abuses they may endure or what may happen to their health or well-being after they get out of the military, but sure are hell-bent on getting young, healthy people just en masse recruited into the military. And frequently this focuses on people that are socioeconomically disadvantaged and that may have limited options or not know all their options. It really seems that these laws and the way they're going about this current law is really focused on, is very predatory in a lot of different ways based upon what I've seen so far. And the politicians are using these choice phrases like, oh, educating these people about their options. And it's just like, but are you? Are they really educating them about their options? You know? Or are they looking for people that are in poverty? Because we live in a country that doesn't even want to feed people that are American citizens, but are okay with recruiting them in the military, where they could get injured or killed. And then sent to deal with Veterans Health Administration afterwards if they survive that long. And Veterans Health Administration is a nightmare. I've done tons of videos about that. So I have a really big issue with this type of legislation because I view it as extraordinarily predatory. I don't see them going into these prep schools. They're super elite and finding out how to recruit wealthy kids into the military with billionaire parents. I don't see that happening. And until I start seeing that happening, I'm going to continue to have a lot of problems with these kinds of laws. And until I see full support for people and what happens to them after they join the military, I'm going to continue to have an issue with these laws.